Hello and welcome to the Knights of Awakening. I am your host, Justin Bain. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Knights of Awakening interview series. Before we get started, though, I just want to remind you all of our commitment to the promotion of the good works that are coming out of the community. At the end of this broadcast and video, we will tell you how you can get on here with me, or if you prefer Allie or Charles or whoever, and get the word out. Also, stay tuned to find out how you can get a chance to win one of two copies of the book that we're going to be talking about today. Since 1977, the ways of the Jedi within the fictional Star Wars universe have always had an allure for many of us. Haven't you ever wondered just for a moment, what if the Jedi were real? What if that question was the beginning of your own personal awakening? The journey of Luke Skywalker from a moisture farmer on Tatooine to becoming a Jedi Knight follows the archetypal hero's journey as defined by Joseph Campbell and his Monomyth. Just like all other great sagas and their heroes, Star Wars is not only an epic and compelling story, but also a tutorial and a guide to fulfilling a satisfying life. The Modern Jedi Knight will follow it and examine the path of Luke Skywalker and use it as a guideline for your own hero's journey. Inspired by the Star Wars movies, but not solely limited to the fiction, the Modern Jedi Knight will train you as realistically and as closely as possible to the fictional Jedi while using current tested and actual training techniques in use on our planet Earth today. In development for 10 years, the author has personally explored many different avenues and training ideas in order to develop a training strategy that truly works. By synthesizing ancient Eastern and Western philosophy with modern science, knowledge, and technology, training as a modern Jedi will make you a complete person. One who is happy, energetic, healthy, connected, centered, and maybe, just maybe, even a little bit enlightened. That was a short description of the book we're talking about today. The book is called The Modern Jedi Knight, A Guide to Health and Happiness, inspired by the masters from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And we are joined by the author, Matthew Siegrist. Good morning, sir.
Hello. Yes, good morning.
How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
A little tongue-tied this morning, apparently. That's okay. Yes. I plan on having you do all the talking today, so I'm okay in that regard.
Oh, there you go.
So before we get started, why don't you tell the audience out there a little bit about yourself?
All right. Let's see. The short story. 45 years old, so I was 6 when Star Wars first came out, and I saw it in the theater. So I've been a fan for my entire life. Since I've seen Star Wars, I've been married for 21 years, 3 kids, 3 dogs, and currently working as an airline pilot, which is the dream job that I was inspired by when I first saw Star Wars back in '77.
And it's kind of cool because I've probably been on an airplane of yours or two. We won't say who you work for, but I'm sure I've flown with you a few times. So I can vouch that you're a pretty good pilot because here we are.
Well, yep, we're all still here.
How long have you been on this path?
This path started for me back in 2004 is when I really started looking into it as more than just a passing fancy. So what am I going on, 13 years now? 12, 13 years?
Well, you say 2004. That's when you found the online community and stuff like that?
Yeah. It was when I first saw one of the master replicas lightsabers. I saw that, and then that, had me start searching through the internet, and I started finding all kinds of stuff online, and was kind of surprised that I wasn't the only one doing a search for that, and so it kind of intrigued me, and I started looking into it even further, and the rest is history.
Those master replicas have gotten me in trouble. I've only owned 2, I've only owned two. The first one I owned was the Luke Skywalker, the green blade. And I have 5 girls, and they're rowdy and rambunctious. So, of course, I'm going to buy them all lightsabers because that's what rambunctious people do. We smack each other with lightsabers. And I didn't know this at the time, but you're not supposed to use those as, fighting instruments. And
I think.
Well, and my second to youngest took it and took a whack at somebody and missed and snapped it, and I was already in trouble because the things were really expensive back in the day. For when they come out, $100-something was a lot of money, and when she broke it, it was just I could see the hellfire coming out of my wife's eyes and ears, and that was my last master replica. She never let me buy another one.
Yes, I think that's a lesson that everybody learned the hard way, because I have done the same thing with my children. And I started off, the first one I got, I actually bought it used, but it was one of the electroluminescent, same ones, Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker green. And it lasted about, I think I got 2 weeks out of it before it broke.
But it did make a cool prop. It did make a cool prop for me. I just told people to use their imagination, pretend that there's a blade coming out of it, because after it snapped in half, I had to cut it down to.
I ended up taking the guts out of mine, and you're able to now get aftermarket stuff, and you can replace the innards and change the lights and stuff. So it's back and working, and it's just not in its original form. So.
We won't tell anybody. Well, I guess I was going to say we won't tell anybody, but I guess everybody knows now.
That's all right.
Are you open to others in your life about your path and philosophy?
I don't have anybody really. I can't think of the last time anybody asked me about any kind of religious affiliation or philosophical life ideas or anything like that. But say 6-7 years ago, if people had asked, if it somehow came up in conversation, I'd most likely mention that I was Buddhist or Zen, which I think is, both of those are very, very similar to the fictional and then the real world Jedi as well. But, lately I have started saying if someone would mention, I would say, yes, I am a Jedi, because of the way I've incorporated the book into my life, and some of the things I think that when I think of the Jedi, I think that they're more than like Buddhist monk or Zen practitioner. So and then people will say, oh, well, what's the difference? And then I tell them, and we go from there.
All you have to do is tell them, have you ever seen a Jedi crash a starfighter? Well, you're in good hands then.
Yeah. Well, there's one movie where the guy kind of did it, but yeah. Actually, now I'm thinking it's twice in the same movie.
What was it? One of the prequels?
Yeah. No, Empire Strikes Back.
Oh,
he crashes a snow speeder and then crashes onto Dagobah later.
That's true, but we're just going to say he was landing. He was just landing.
There you go. It was a forceful landing. Yes.
Where may have people seen you elsewhere in the community? I know you said you've been around since 2004. I'm sure some of them out there bumped into you maybe.
Yeah. I started off. There was. I wish I could even remember a lot of the websites. A lot of them weren't even active when I found them, and they just had pages and stuff that had been written, and the website was still active, but they would talk about a forum, and they weren't ever there, and I can't even remember the name of those websites. But the one that does come to mind is Ashla Nights. I participated in Ashla Nights for probably a year and a half or so, and started coming up with some ideas where I don't want to say that they were lacking, but I thought that there was things that could have been done differently, and that's the path I decided I was going to follow. So I pretty much abandoned my doing anything on National Nights, and then I really haven't spent any time in the online community in the last probably 8-9 years. I've been just doing a lot of research and developing the way I think it should be. It works for me, so that's what I've been pretty much spending my time on.
Yeah, a lot of those old places have since come and gone, and I know it's not. I think it's a good and bad thing because a lot of people are starting to do, and we'll talk about some of your offline stuff later. But a lot of people are going offline, and I think that's a good way to go. I think the online places eventually will be just virtual libraries for people. And I think that's okay. I think the more people get face-to-face together and commune and practice together, it's just going to make everybody stronger and better. But before we get any further... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I definitely agree with you. And that was one of the things that led me to go down my own path, is because I was just, you can do some things on the internet, and it's a great tool, but it has a lot of limitations also. And I think the face-to-face training is the way you should do it. And like, as I mentioned throughout the book, it doesn't even need to be with some Jedi master. I think you can have a teacher who will teach you martial arts and another teacher who will help you with meditation, and you can use those people that are in your community and create relationships and friendships with them. And I think that works better personally than doing everything as an online community. Right.
Before we get any further, I just want to put the call-in number out there for folks. If you're out there listening, and during the show, if you have a question or a comment for Matthew or myself, the number to call in is 657-383-1532. That's 657-383-1532. So let's get into it. As you posed the question in your book, why Star Wars?
Star Wars, yeah. The reason, we could have done many different kinds of inspirations, and we could have done, old world, the Knights of the Round Table, or we could have done many other different kinds of fictional works like The Hobbit and everything. But Star Wars, it's the modern epic tale of the hero, and everybody knows it. They may not be able to speak English, but it's kind of like C-3PO when he was in the village of the Ewoks telling the story. They may not know the language, but you make some of the sound effects and you make some of the motions, and people will be like, I know who you're talking about. And so it's a worldwide way of being able to connect everyone into one shared passion.
Yeah, it's pretty universal, perhaps even outside of the Earth's borders somewhere in a real galaxy far, far away. Maybe they even know about it at this point. What qualities make someone a Jedi in your view?
In my view, it's mostly helping others. It's, altruism and compassion and, being there to help your fellow man is most of it. And then the other part of it is just, self-cultivation, mindfulness, and basically, being happy.
And we were just talking about how universal Star Wars is, so it's really no surprise. I mean, it was for me back in the day when like you, I started looking around for stuff online and found people, found that I was not the only one with a great idea, apparently, because there was already a lot of people out there, because it is so universal. Why do you think, beyond the universal appeal of Star Wars, which in itself is a really awesome universe to kind of dive into as a fan, why do you think so many are attracted to the Jedi path?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people are looking for answers, and they're not finding it through the traditional methods like theistic religions, because, as we're learning more and more with science, the two really don't mix. And, plus the discrimination and the scandals that are going on within some of the churches, people think that's pushing people away, but they still feel there's something out there that transcends our knowledge, and they're trying to look for it and figure out where it is. And, the Jedi were influenced by, a lot of Eastern religions and Western religions too, when they were first, when Lucas was coming up with the idea. And, back in 1977 was before the internet was around. So a lot of people weren't aware of a lot of this stuff. And so I think that was kind of like our first introduction to a lot of the thoughts and philosophies that we weren't really familiar with, so before cheap airfare and the internet, that was really how those ideas got spread. But now, it's with the internet, people can get online and they're finding this stuff, and they're saying, oh, like you said, and like I said, with a quick Google search, you're like, oh, I'm not the first person thinking of this. And
right.
It kind of gets a community that can get together, and I think that's where it all starts.
I was gonna ask you something, and I forgot. I'm sure it'll hit me here in a little bit. It's early for me, Oh, I know what I was gonna say.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I was gonna say. You said just a second ago that the church is starting to fall behind because of science. And I patrol a really quiet, sleepy town at night times, and so I have two choices of things that I can listen to. I can be inundated with 24 hours of political talk, or I can listen to Coast to Coast AM, and it's not usually a hard choice for me, because I can get enough of the political stuff everywhere else. And I just heard something recently where they were talking about how the Catholic Church was starting to open up about aliens, and I thought that was interesting. So they're trying.
Wow.
I think they're trying to get hip, or I don't know. Maybe there's more to it, but
yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that.
I always enjoy hearing people tell me how they found their quote unquote moment of awakening. Your book gives us a lot of insight into how you came to this path. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah, like I kind of alluded to earlier, my path started pretty much the same way that Luke Skywalker's path did. It was with a lightsaber. I was in Disney World, and I had taken my family down there for a vacation. We had just done the Star Tours ride, and I was, after the ride, you're funneled into the little gift shop. So there's all the Star Wars stuff in there, and I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I heard that snap, hiss, hum of a lightsaber lighten up, and I was, head started snapping around, and that's where I saw that first master replica lightsaber. Was some guy was holding it, and it was $150. And after paying for Disney World, I didn't have the money for that. But we went home, and so I started. Then that's when I got online, found some other people were out there, and I realized, found there was like a group out in New York called the New York Jedi, and I was like, I'd like something like that in my own neck of the woods. And since I'm in Denver, Colorado, I came up with the Mile High Jedi as the name, and tried to get a group going from there. It was going to be dueling and some choreography and stuff like that, and that didn't really work out. But it started me looking at other things. I started doing martial arts, looking into kendo, and that's when I started learning a lot about the martial arts that I didn't know before. They were talking about it's not really learning to fight; it's more about self-cultivation and defense, and how to grow as a person. And then I started noticing some of these similarities. At the same time, I could be like, oh, well, that's just like it was with the Jedi, or that was like Luke, or that was like Yoda. And then I got a couple more crazy ideas, and that's pretty much where it all started.
I started around the same time that I met my wife, and she thought I was insane. She thought I was crazy until a few years went by, and she's seen the true impact that this can have on somebody, and that's part of why I love books like this, and because I know for a fact from personal experience that these diving into these types of understandings can really change your life.
Yes, that is true. I've done, my wife, I've been married twice as long as I've been on this journey. So my wife was the same thing. She's like, "You're doing what?" And,
Yeah.
But she's noticed some significant changes between, when we first met and the way I am now. And I've had some pretty radical shifts, even as far as like my own, political standings and stuff like that. Thoughts on, religion. I used to be a fairly intolerant atheist, and now I'm like, I realize we're all following the same path. We're just like, taking different footsteps on it. Basically, is just kind of depends what beat of the drum you're gonna follow. But it's all the same place.
You talked about, I think we've already talked about some of the real world influences that brought you here. Were there any other that we didn't mention?
Let's see. I mean, I quote so many different, besides the Star Wars movies, I quote so much real world influences. The Dalai Lama, Eckhart Tolle's got some great stuff on mindfulness. Miyamoto Musashi was a Japanese swordsman from the 16th century. And he wrote the Book of Five Rings. And I mean, there's just all kinds of good stuff in there. Lao Tzu with Tao. And all kinds to, presidents. And I'm trying to think of other quotes I use. Maya Angelou was a good one. Mother Teresa. There's just all of them serve as inspiration.
I thought it was interesting because we've talked about Luke Skywalker and lightsabers, but you actually started out wanting to be more like Han Solo before you wanted to be like Luke Skywalker. What changed your outlook?
Yes, I did. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and so maybe the whiny farm boy hit a little bit too close to home for not wanting to be Luke. And Han Solo was just to a 6-year-old kid like me. I mean, that was his own ship. He's got his own, he's got a crew, and he's got the moves, he's got the lines, he's got the looks. He was really cool. And but Han evolved just as I did. He was selfish and very into himself and what's in it for me. And throughout the 3 movies, he evolved. So I think we all kind of followed. I think maybe he was inspired by Luke a little bit as well, and so I kind of took that same thing, went from a inward-looking, selfish kind of view of the world, and started opening up. And so I think I kind of evolved the same way as Han did.
Well, I'll ask you a follow-up question to that. Did he shoot first?
Of course. He did, but there was a great article written a couple of years ago about whether it was justifiable self-defense or not, even by shooting first. And this lawyer thought that he could have gotten Han free if he'd have been taken into imperial custody by our interpretation of the law. So.
Well, especially after the other incident where some guy just yells at a Jedi and he gets his arm chopped off. I don't know. I think Han was probably more justified than the other two.
Yes, I would have to agree.
Your book talks about how a man used stories to pass down, or how man has used stories to pass down important information over the years. How important are myths and legends, and how can a quote unquote modern man learn from these? How does the hero's journey play into these themes?
Yeah, the stories are extremely important because they are what defined us as a culture and a race, as a species, for tens of thousands of years. Our values and knowledge were passed along by these stories, and we learned, the difference between right and wrong around the campfire. The medium has changed through the years as we went from stories that were told verbally, and then we were able to write them down, and now we're able to put them in the movies. The hero's journey, was defined by Joseph Campbell. Just realized that all of the stories all share this common outline or archetype, and it's common. I don't ever know if he actually addressed this, but the way I see it is he realized that they're common because they're all trying to do something, and it's not just entertainment. It's supposed to be a learning event as well.
Right.
And so we use the modern interpretation of these stories as the inspiration and a blueprint for a guideline on how we should be living our lives now. It seems, going off of that, I think that's one of the reasons why the prequel trilogies were so poorly received, let me say it that way, by a number of people, is because it was more a special effects extravaganza, and there really wasn't a huge amount of story to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the backlash is that it was people wanted more of the story, and there was, you could look through the three movies and pick out good snippets, but it just didn't have a full cohesive story like the original trilogy did.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I never, until I read stuff by Joseph Campbell, I never realized it. All the stories I've heard, or the things I've read, or the things I've seen on TV over the years, I never realized that there are these common similarities, and it's true. There is. Do you think I've always kind of wondered this, and do you think it's something that we just do subconsciously, or I mean, I don't think I've ever told a story, or not all the stories I've ever told my children or people were intended that way, but they always seem to come out that way. Do you think it's something subconscious about us that causes that to happen?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's, we're looking for something, and that quote from the first Matrix movie where they basically said we made the world a utopia, and the whole system crashed because nobody liked it. I think we look for the struggle because I really think the struggle is an important part of the story. It's what defines you as how you relate and react to that struggle, and it builds you up and forms you. And so I think that's part of the reason why nobody wants to hear a story of, if you want to take like any Disney movie, it's not just the prince and the princess get together and it's all happily ever after. There has to be some struggle to make the end result worthwhile.
Yeah, we could do 1,000 shows on the hero's journey and probably never give it its full justice. But when people read that and they understand it, then it really can make an impact on how you see things. And
yes,
he's a really smart guy. There's a guy in my town that in the town I work in, whose name is Joseph Campbell, and I always kind of pick on him every time I see him or talk to him.
Some big shoes to fill.
Yeah. He says, ha ha ha. I hear it all the time. Just kind of like, my last name is Gates, and everybody just assumes I'm related to Bill, and if I were, this would be a syndicated FM radio show right now, and not just on the internet, probably.
Yes.
Your book talks about the fictional Jedi quite a bit, and as you know, that's always kind of a point of discussion within the online and offline communities these days. How does being a Jedi in the real world differ from the Jedi in the fiction, and what do they have in common?
Well, the real big difference is obviously no lightsabers, because we'd all have one if we had the choice. And the other part is, it's not having all of the force powers, the force jump, force choke, lightning, all that other stuff. Otherwise, I'd say those are, that and not having a centralized order, not having a large temple, or if people are offended by that word, a Jedi headquarters that, kind of would serve as a global oversight committee of how things are supposed to go. We don't have that. But I think we actually have a lot more in common than the differences are. Training for self-cultivation and self-improvement while training to help others, offering aid and assistance to those that are in need, listening with a compassionate ear. Those are a lot of the traits that I think the fictional and the real-world modern Jedi share.
Yeah, you better believe we would all have lightsabers, and I would probably only have half my fingers left, but I would still have that lightsaber.
Yes.
Your book compares the Star Wars fiction to the world we live in. What similarities exist between the two?
There's a lot of strife in the world right now, and just like there was in the Star Wars galaxy, a lot of people under the impression that a privileged few are in control. There's a big gap between the haves and the have-nots, and it just seems to be getting wider and wider. And I think people are looking for some inspiration and some hope, and they want to gain some control over their lives that I think they've kind of let go in the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah. I just hope it doesn't follow suit as far as some kind of civil war or something. I hope we figure it out before that.
Well, that's what I think. It's funny is now, we're able to communicate. 7 billion people are connected, but yet you can't talk to the person sitting next to you on the bus or on an airline seat. We're also being, everything technology, I think, is pushing a lot of us inside. And that's one of the things about Star Wars that I liked, is even though that you had all the technology, people were able to still maintain the human connection throughout it all. And so I think we're starting to pick up on it. People are starting to realize that, maybe all your friends on Facebook, maybe there's more to it than a little status update, and, connecting with actual people in your community and your real friends. And I think there's a lot of people, everything, we're also, it's like a kid with a new toy with the technology. It's like, oh, gee, that's so cool. But now I think, now the parent has to come in and start limiting the screen time, metaphorically, even if you're doing it to yourself, just limit your screen time and actually go out and have a real world experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, I think the community is doing a good job of going offline. Speaking of offline chapters, real quick, are you involved with the offline group, the Colorado Jedi, at all?
You know what? I haven't even done a search for it. I didn't know that they existed. They are closer to your neck of the woods than mine. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I might have to do some search into that. I remember, I did searches probably 10 years ago, and I don't recall seeing anything then. And like I said, I haven't been doing a lot of searching for the community things since then, but that's definitely something I'm going to have to look into.
Yep. You talk about a pilgrimage you took. in the book. Tell us about your trip to the Yoda Fountain in California.
Yes, the Yoda Fountain. I'm an airline pilot, so I've been to San Francisco many times, and but yet I'd never gone to see the Yoda Fountain, which, for those who aren't familiar, it's a life-size statue of Yoda sitting on a fountain right in front of the entrance to Lucasfilm in the Presidio area of San Francisco. And so I figured, it was time for me to commit. Couldn't call myself a real fan if I hadn't been there. So I took the light rail and a bus and walked for a while, and finally made my way there. And it was really enjoyable experience because I sat there, took some selfies and some other pictures, but then I just sat and people watched for over an hour, and it was pretty impressive because I saw at least 100 people whose only object of only purpose was to come up and see the statue, and they'd look at it and do the same thing, photos, videos, but then they'd leave. And so I sat there and watched all these people show up, and I heard people had traveled from other continents. I heard Russian and German and British accents, and all these people coming who they made a special point just to come see the fountain, and everybody was happy. I would sit, so I was looking at the back of the fountain, and it's like an alcove. There's only one way to get to it. And as people would round the corner, they'd see the fountain, and they would just start smiling. And it was a pretty moving thing to watch. I was impressed that it had that big of an influence and effect on people.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of validating in a way, isn't it?
Yes. It's it makes me realize that it wasn't just me.
Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to see on the internet, but it's really cool to see that kind of thing in person. It can be really impactful. In your book, the reason I wanted you to elaborate on that is because it feels like a really important part in the book. When they pick up the book out there, and when you guys read it, when you get to this part in the book, you guys will know what I'm talking about. It kind of feels like the way you describe it kind of felt like I was there, doing what you were just describing, and it kind of seemed like I could almost feel the impact of seeing people light up, when they've seen this little fictional character that has had such a impact on the whole world.
Yeah, it was special, and I've gone back and I've done it a couple times since then, and it's the same every time. Every time's the first time when you do it. It's pretty amazing.
I'm going to share a quote from your book. What the world needs are heroes and warriors. What did you mean by that?
Well, if you finish the sentence, the rest of the sentence is Jedi who believe that one person can change themselves and the world for the better.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to be fighting the Empire and doing all of these hero things. It's just simply being nice to people, holding the door open for someone. If you see someone bullying someone or even cyberbullying, you call someone out on it, and just everyone. It doesn't have to be these epic movie worthy acts as far as heroes and warriors. They just what we need is people that are willing to help and stand up for people that either can't or are maybe at this point unwilling to do so for themselves.
Mm-hmm. I had posted that probably over a month ago, something similar to that. And it was, focusing in, like what you said, focusing in on the things that you can influence, the moments that are within your sphere of influence make a bigger impact on the whole world rather than scouring the universe for that great, evil.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Some ancient story, I can't remember if it was Chinese or Japanese, but it was a couple monks walking along the shoreline after a storm, and one of the monks is picking up and throwing, I think it was clams or something, back into the ocean. And the person says to him, well, why are you doing that? You can't have all of them. And he says, but, I can pick one up. He's like, but I can save this one. It's the same kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about training. In your book, you say that there are many places to go and train. I think we alluded to this at the beginning of the show. But there are many places to go and train and be a Jedi. Yet none of them really do a good job of encompassing all of the aspects that make a Jedi. They do a good job of narrowing in on specific areas, but miss when it comes to the the total package, the complete training. What do you think Jedi training should look like? And tell us, and you can also tell us about Modern Jedi Knight, ModernJediKnight.com.
All right. So yeah, this is one of those. I think I wrote that paragraph, or the initial part of it 10 years ago. So I will preface by saying that I think there has been some evolution in a lot of the online community since then. That since I haven't been paying attention, I didn't really look until just recently, and I'm like, oh, it seems like we're all kind of going down the same path now. But before it was like, well, being a Jedi was all about meditation. That was, like what I felt one website would say. It was all about meditation. And another one was all about only lightsabers. And I was just kind of, to me, I thought it had to be everything. And so that's what started me on my journey. And so I started writing a book. And then as I was writing the book, 10 years ago, I was like, I don't have all the answers. I wasn't ready to put the information out. So then I started with the website. I did the modernjediknight.com, and that's where I started kind of working through the thoughts that I was having in my head. I, put ramblings out there. I was trying to post, 3-4 times a week with just little 3-4 paragraph reports. And that's where I developed and fleshed out a lot of the ideas. And, current events, too. I would take current events, and I would, give my take on them, and, a lot of the, civil unrest with the shootings and stuff like that. We'd talk about that and kind of, develop it. And, I wanted to get a lot more question and answer kind of thing to develop, and that never really took off yet. But now I've got the book done, I'm getting ready to start working on the website again, and I want to add some more to it. I want to continue with that, current events, and then take away things from the book. And haven't quite decided how fully I want to do it yet. But I'm thinking maybe if I do 5 days a week, and like day one, or Monday would be mind, or Tuesday would be the body, Wednesday would be the spirit. Maybe some health, nutrition along the way. I'm still kind of working out how I want to proceed with everything, but I do want to develop a directory that will, allow, okay, if this is what you want to train, do a search. Like if you want to train the body, do a search for MoveNat, and, find a way to train in your local area. Or if you want, nutrition, go here, and, kind of give people to serve as a, evolving guidebook of, as I find new things out there, and I'm like, oh, this would be perfect. Put that out there so people get are made aware of it.
That's I'll back you up in your statement about the training. Even though and we'll use Ashland Knights as an example, because that's where I had direct influence, and still to this day. Ashland Knights, for example, was a great place to train the mind. And as an example, and it was, you know, the online training stuff is useful, but it has its limits. It's hard to hold each other accountable to training, especially when you get into things like health and nutrition, meditation, physical fitness, and stuff like that. But I will also concede the point, as you did, that again, the more we go offline, I'm seeing that people are helping each other, and they're really, you know, beyond being able to do community service, which a lot of the groups do, and they do a good job of it. They're starting to hold each other accountable to each other, as far as the standards go, meditation and the things that was really hard to do online. As you know, there were always the great debates about coming up with a common core style training, because it was, once it comes to the accountability portion of it, then it's really hard to do that. We have Skype and stuff now, stuff that we really didn't have access to back then. But yeah, I think it is finally starting to come around to a more total package. And like I said, even though and again, I'll use Ashland Knights as an example. That was always one of my personal complaints about a lot of the academies back then. Even our own academy, it was really hard to do certain things. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And, part of the other thing too, I think that the problem with the online, and I think it's an individual journey, but, there's a common foundation to it, but how you proceed along it, like for me, I really think the saber staff is cool. So I like training with the bow staff. It's the equivalent I have, but some other people may want, sword training to, work as a lightsaber instead. And then there's other people where it's even discussed in the fiction, you have the more philosophical or the consular Jedi who carry a lightsaber because it's part of the package, but they don't really train on using it, and so it's really is a last resort for when negotiations fail. And so some people may only, not even do any kind of weapons training at all. So I think that's another problem, is I think it's by going local, you can find what it is that you want, whereas online, it would just be impossible to sit there and try to train everyone online on, 20 different sword styles and other, that's just on the lightsaber. I mean, so then hand-to-hand combat, some people may want, karate and Muay Thai and Krav Maga, and, it's just, you can't put all that online, whereas making it a more individual choice, you can find what's in your neighborhood that works for you. And I think that helps, instead of trying to make it all one global centralized online community. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. It does. I'm just happy that we get to see this evolution, and it's starting to happen. And I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's bad at all. In your book, and you alluded to this just a second ago, in your book, and this is one of the things I found most interesting to me, because you bring up a concept that I had never considered before. You talk about the three pillars: the mind, the body, spirit. The pretty common stuff that most of us know and understand. But you add another part in there, and you call it the Republic. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. It's, in doing all the research for the book, it was like the Shaolin monks, they would congregate in their little area, and, they did this wonderful training, and they're able to accomplish these amazing things. but yet they never, at least as far as I was made aware of, they never really had any chance to use that training. It was all self-cultivation. And the Republic was, okay, it's, you spend some time on yourself. Now you're going to take what you've learned and you got to give it back to the public. And it's part of that, you know, you reap what you sow kind of thing. So, you know, oh boy, trying to come up with the words. So you've spent the time developing yourself, and now it's, you need to go out and you need to act as the inspiration to others, and, you know, be nice to people, be the hero, be the warrior, you know, as any way you see fit, hold the door open, stop a mugging, whatever you got to do. But, you know, it's just, you try to make the world a better place. If you can light that spark in one other person, then maybe they can do the same in another, and hopefully we can get this ball rolling in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And it's, like I said, it was interesting because I had never considered that as being important to keep at the front of your mind. And it is, because why do we develop? I mean, we have to look at, why do we develop our mind, body, and soul, or spirit? We do it so that we can go out there and be the best servants that we can be for our fellow men. And
Mm-hmm.
if that idea isn't at the front and foremost, because it is just as important, then I think it gets lost in translation sometimes. And I was kind of blown away. I was like, wow, I never really thought about having that a part of those other three that we're so familiar with. Because if you don't have a purpose beyond self-improvement, then you're probably not what you think you are. Maybe you are just a monk at that point or something.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's pretty much the way it was. It was one of those aha moments that I had where it was fun. I was thinking about Yoda, and I was like, you know, Yoda's, you know, one of the last few Jedi. He could still be doing something, but he's kind of stuck on this planet, and he's not really doing anything. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and he went there because he still needed the training. After 800-900 years, he still realized he had more training to do himself. And then, you know, whether it was the Force that told him that someone was going to come find him to train or not, or, you know, maybe I don't even know if he was able to get off planet once he was there. It's, you know, some stories that are still left to be told. But, you know, he was there for himself, but once he had himself in the right place, you had to pass along what you had learned to someone else. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where Luke Skywalker comes into the picture. And then, you know, and now and I took those words to heart, and that's why I started writing the book, because I was like, okay, I've got this idea. I think it needs to be put out so other people, you know, can hopefully be inspired by it as well.
We are talking with Matthew Siegrist, the author of The Modern Jedi Knight, A Guide to Health and Happiness, inspired by the Masters from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. In a chapter of the book, you describe the Force in great detail, down to its many different aspects and quote-unquote moving parts. How would you describe the Force to someone who may not be very familiar with the concept?
You know, it's interesting because even though I spent so much time on the book and we're all familiar with it throughout the movies and everything, it's still hard to put into words, especially if you're trying to put it into like a sound bite, you know, something that's really small. I mean, you know, the whole book could have just been on my thoughts on the Force or whatever. But so yeah, for someone who wasn't familiar with the concept, it's basically, you know, it's where do we come from? Why are we here? Kind of thing. You know, because even, you know, science is great. We're talking about the Big Bang Theory and everything, but, you know, where did the Big Bang come from? Or if you want to use the Force as a metaphor for, you know, religious, like God. Well, where did God come from? It's the immortal essence that's always been there, and it's what's brought about everything in our galaxy, and as far as we know, and it's just also how would I say? It's like a connection. It's what, going back to the Republic, as you develop this, you realize it's in you, and that same essence is in someone else, and then this is where you start getting to that dissolution of the ego, and well, maybe I'm not just me. Maybe there's a little bit of me in them, and there's a little bit of them in me, and if you start thinking along those kind of lines, it gets people a lot less willing to be angry and fight and stuff like that, because you realize the damage is being done to yourself. So yeah, it's just kind of that it's the thing that ties everything together, and it's just kind of responsible for why we're all here.
I very much can appreciate the answer, because it's honest. It is really hard, and I have what's the word I'm looking for? It's easy for me to ask you that question, much harder for you to answer it. So I appreciate your honesty. We probably could dedicate, just like with the hero's journey, we could probably dedicate another 1,000 shows to that, to the Force just in itself. So, but
yep.
In my defense, the Knights of Awakening grew so far beyond where it started. I always have to ask questions like that, because there are folks who have been drawn to the ideal of a path like this, who may not be familiar. And I always find it interesting that people know about Star Wars, but a lot of them still haven't looked deeper into the mythos to see the stuff that we've been talking about today, and the Force is one of those topics.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Your book describes the fictional Jedi's history, and there's even a really good timeline. I mean, you lay it out. This is when it started. This is what happened here. How is this fictional history important for someone who wants to, let's say they pick up your book and they want to follow the examples you have? How is that important to them?
A lot of it just started off as it was really good stories, and I'd put a lot of work into writing that portion of that chapter, and then Disney came in and bought Lucasfilm and decided that the expanded universe was no longer canon. And so I had this huge section of the book, and I was just looking at it, and I was like, well, it would have been good to know as history, but now it's not canon. It's legends, it's lore, it's part of the same story, that the Jedi would now tell around the campfire, and really. So I thought it was good to keep in. It just shows that even throughout 25 plus thousand years of history with the Jedi, is that there, it wasn't always unicorns and rainbows, that there was a lot of strife, both internal and external, and struggle. And it just showed you, served as a very good example of perseverance and resilience in the face of adversity. And, it's to give the reader the desire, even when things get tough, to stick to it and, see it through to the end.
And I just want to add that none of us care that Disney decided that. We still most of us like the expanded universe more than the canon universe. So
mm-hmm. Yes,
take that, Disney.
Yes, and like I said, when everyone was having, when it was decided, it was no longer canon, there was a huge amount of controversy, and it's like I told everyone, the opportunity, it just means they're going to get to tell the story again, and they'll make it canon the second time. And now we're seeing like Grand Admiral Thrawn's going to make it to season 3 of Rebels. So Thrawn's coming back to canon. So all the other stories can do the exact same thing too. So it's just wait and see. But they have plenty of material to work with.
I'm gonna go into a nerd moment here and say that I don't care about any other movie other than The Force Unleashed. I want to see that. I want to see The Force Unleashed. I mean, the dude brought down a Star Destroyer out of the sky. I mean, he's kind of a big deal to me.
And that's one of those. It was always so cool watching that, but then you're thinking, well, how boring would the movie be? Because whatever, there's so many things. Oh, Boba Fett's flying away with Han Solo. Oh, you just reach out and grab it and bring it back. Yeah. There's so many parts of where you're just like, oh, why didn't he do that? Oh, because the movie'd be really boring if that's what they did. So
that's
I understand.
True.
You got to work with it both ways.
However, if you've never played that two-part game series, put it on expert difficulty, and then tell me how boring it is. I probably rage quit probably 1,000 times, and maybe went through a couple of controllers, but.
Yes, no, I still play it. I got it on an old system. Yeah, I still play that game. It's pretty cool.
I love it. It was a great story, and not to get too far off the beaten path here, but I remember hearing back then that they were going to possibly develop it into something further, and it just never came to fruition, which kind of sucked. But let's see here. What are your views on ranks and trials as they relate to the modern day Jedi?
Ranks I'm not so keen on, and trials are very important. So to expand upon that, the rank, we talked about, there's no Jedi Council, there's no Jedi Order. So really what your rank, especially if you go with like little groups, we talked about Ashla Knights, and we talked about the Colorado Jedi. There's these groups. They all have different requirements or whatever to reach those ranks, and plus I think some people get so hung up on achieving the rank. They're like, oh, I've got to be a Jedi now, and I like climbing mountains here in Colorado, and the getting to the top of the mountain, that's the top of the mountain's only a fraction of the journey, and really it's the journey going up there that I think is more important. That's where the development's made. You don't when you get to the top of the mountain and you're standing there and you're just resting, you're not really doing anything except enjoying the view. It's the walk up. That's where you're making the progress, and that's coming into that. That's where the trials I think are very important. I think they're highly individual. I think, but I've kind of based them off of the trials, off of that's not even canon anymore now, but the trials of the flesh and the trial of insight and trial of courage, to do all that stuff. I've listed a lot of different alternatives that you can do here, that you can't do because we don't have holograms and lightsabers and all the stuff in the Star Wars universe. So I came up with a bunch of alternatives of what you could do here to serve as your trial. But I do think you have to pass all your trials before you can award yourself any kind of title. And for me, that's just Jedi. So there's no Jedi Knight, Jedi Master, Grand Master Jedi. I don't any of that stuff. To me, you're either the Jedi or you're the Padawan. Is the way I look at it.
It's fun because people will still address me with the title that I received at Ashla Knights, and it always makes me double take still, because I don't, nobody ever hears me say it, because it's just not. I mean, I've had lots of titles in my life, and none of them are more important than the other. It's my actions that are going to speak louder than than those words in that title. So, but another thing for you to check out, something that I'm still trying to discover, and I'm going to try to get these folks on at some point, is the Jedi Federation, and just something for you to check out when you got some time. It's from what I understand, and I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want it to be wrong, but it seems like that's a direction that they are trying to take that in as a some sort of body that helps standardize the training and requirements and stuff like that for the offline groups. So just something for you to check out when you got a chance. You can find them on Facebook. I'm pretty sure they have a website somewhere. But you said something about climbing a mountain, and it's interesting because there's a song that I've taken a fancy to lately that I heard on the radio a little while back, and the song is called Invincible, and the group is 12 Foot Ninja. I love band names, 12 Foot Ninja. If I were going to make a band, that would be a cool band name. But I'm going to paraphrase a piece of the song because I don't remember exactly, but there's a part in the song where he talks about he climbs a mountain just to discover that there's a second mountain still blocking the sun. So it as you said, getting to the top may be important, but understanding that it doesn't end there. It doesn't end. And getting up the mountain is, in my opinion, and I think I agree with you, is that that's the more important part of it, because that's where you're going to learn. We learn nothing by achieving that goal, other than that we can maybe feel confident, but it's that journey is where we're learning stuff.
Yes, and definitely.
But to not just come to an end and say, oh well, that's it, I'm good to go.
Yeah, there's in Colorado we got the 14ers, the 54 peaks that are over 14,000 feet. You don't climb one and then say, oh, I'm done. You got 50. There's 53 more to climb after that, and after that you got the 13,000 foot peaks, and there's just as that analogy, there's all kinds of stuff, but you don't know. You may reach the top, or think, oh, the top's just right over here, and it's a false summit. You still got another lot more ways to go, and so it's or you may have hit that part of your goal, but then you realize, oh well, you know what? There's something more I need to work on, and so that's then you start hiking again. So.
Let's see here. I got myself off track. Wow. Okay. Your book briefly talks about the different aspects of Jedi, or some people call them Force users, whatever. What aspect does your training program support, or maybe I guess the better question would be what quote unquote aspects are you talking about in the book, and how does this differ from the other aspects that are mentioned? Because you do mention a couple.
This would be the traditional light side of the Force. We're following Luke Skywalker's journey, so this would be the light side as far as the aspect. We're different. We're not the dark side of the Force, obviously, and we're not the gray Jedi and all the others out there. Mostly because the light side was the most structured out of them all. I mentioned one point there's a term called force relativism, which that gets taught in the book, where if you basically, it just comes down to the point where you can justify any action. Oh, I was okay to kill this person because what they would have done later in life or whatever. And so by still the light side has the most structure to it, there's the cardinal rules that you're not gonna break. You're not gonna to violate those, and so therefore I think that is, but in my mind, keeps it the most pure, because it has the ideals that you have to hold and live up to, and it's the least selfish or self-serving out of any of the other aspects, in my opinion.
Because there's always, as you know, and over the last couple of weeks, we've talked to a few different aspects. I haven't had anybody on from the dark side or Sith realism or anything like that yet. We have in the past, but I think aspects are important for people because, as you kind of mentioned, it really has to do with that individual's outlook and what they want to accomplish ultimately with what they're doing or with how they're training. That makes the difference. And I think it's for me it's so much easier just to not have labeled aspects, but that's just me, because at a couple weeks ago I talked to a gray Jedi on the program, and I can see some of the viewpoints. I can see some of the viewpoints from the other aspects too, but ultimately we have to choose, where our line is and how we're going to proceed with most everything that we come in contact with.
Agreed.
Speaking of aspects, just as there's many aspects to this path, there are several different codes and mantras. What version of the code do you use and teach or endorse?
The one I like is, I guess I would call it the original version of the code, which was the emotion yet peace, ignorance yet knowledge. I like that one because it shows, as opposed to the later one where it's, there is no emotion, there is peace. Well, there is emotion. We can't live our lives in that perfect tuned, state 100% of the time. So by going off the original version, it shows that, and, going back to what we talked about, there's going to be times where, emotions are going to get the best of you, but how are you going to respond to it? And, there's going to be times where you're not really aware of something. So are you going to go into it? Are you going to develop and read and study up on the subject yourself? You can work your way through the code and do that. It just seems like the more realistic version of the code, whereas the other one would be like the second version of the code is more perfect world. You could say, there is no emotion, there is peace, but we don't live in that perfect world. And I do like Luke Skywalker's version of it as well. He has a lot of good things in there. His is more spelled out. It's a more simple version, so you don't really need to like contemplate it at all. It's like, okay, this is all for self-defense. You're never going to use it, to offensively attack people. Whereas you can get that same information from the other two versions of the code, but it's more a journey that you're going to go on as you make yourself familiar with it and think about the code.
Yeah, I would think his has been his was narrowed down more to more of a statement of intent versus a code, which is fine too. I mean, sometimes the easier the better, because you can really get lost in translation when something is kind of left open, and he did not want that to happen.
Yes, my interpretation, I'm sure, is different than a lot of other people's interpretations as well, and so by making it more laid out in stone, he bypasses that problem. But I think there's something to be learned about going in and examining the older versions of the code also, and that was where it was doing that where I came up with the Republic. It was like, yeah. So
yeah, because I mean, it gives you a purpose. His statement of intent tells you exactly why you're doing this stuff, why you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to my favorite code is the one that you talked about too, the yet. I just think it's more applicable. You know, I don't generally entertain philosophies or things that can't be practiced. I mean, I'll entertain them until I realize they can't be practically used in a practical sense in my life, and I just toss them away. You know, move on to the next thing. So, and that's why I like that code, because in my opinion, I think it's more practical to what we're doing, what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Let's talk about lightsabers. You go into great detail regarding those in your book. Why is this relevant to someone who's training to be a Jedi here on Earth, and how does it fit into your training program?
You know, as we mentioned earlier, you know, it's the lightsaber is the iconic weapon. It's the weapon everyone would choose. Well, I shouldn't say everyone, but I think if anybody had a choice of any kind of, you know, fictional kind of movie weapon, it would be the one that everyone would want, just because, you know, they're just awesome. But, you know, they're also, you know, they identify part of the identity of a Jedi. It's even, you know, Anakin as a little slave boy was able to be like, oh, you got a laser sword. Are you a Jedi? You know, it's part of what they are. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to find, you know, how could you incorporate that here in the real world? And, you know, part of it is it's just the exercise aspect of it. It's, you know, we spend too much time sitting and not enough time moving. So anything you can do to get moving is going to definitely help your fitness. And a lightsaber is a great way of doing that. I remember reading an article about the New York Jedi, and they were talking about people that had made absolutely no changes to their diet, but people had lost, it was like 30 and 40 pounds just by getting out and practicing lightsaber choreography. And, you know, so there's that aspect of it as well. And then, of course, you know, there is the self-defense aspect of it. It may not, you know, you're even learning swords or whatever, you know, chances are you're not really going to have a chance to use it, but you may be able to come up with some impromptu, you know, way of, you know, using an umbrella or a walking stick or a cane or something. You know, you might be able to find a way to take your training and to move it into, you know, some real world aspect. And then there's also, you know, there's a great group. You know, there's been some local groups, you know, in the United States, but there's a group out in Italy called Ludo Sport, and I think they've got a really, really solid foundation. You know, they're working on the individual forms, and it's kind of the same thing as you talked about, that Jedi Federation. They're coming up with a standardized way of being able to spar, and what they're doing is they're taking, you know, martial arts that we are familiar with, and they are transferring them into the styles that would work with if you had a lightsaber, you know, had a weightless weapon with a 360-degree edge, and, you know, all of those. And so and watching the way that these people are training and sparring, it's, you know, it doesn't have a lot of the flashy moves like the choreographed fight scenes that we saw in the movies, but yet you can see there's portions of it in there, and it's really pretty amazing to watch if you haven't seen it. They've got some good stuff going, and that's I'd like to get involved in that training here pretty soon myself.
Yeah, I would argue that if anything, learning to use a lightsaber or anything like that, if anything, it teaches you focus. Anybody who's ever practiced with a practice sword or a real sword or a lightsaber understands that it requires a lot of focus, which will serve you well in a really tense situation, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's forced mindfulness. It's same thing in martial arts class. It's same thing. If someone's throwing a punch at you, if you're not paying attention, you're going to get hit in the face.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
Which
it's
always sucks, by the way.
Yes, it does. But it's a good learning. It's a good, it happens once, and you're like, oh, that's not happening again. So you keep your mind in the game, and you can rock climbing's another great example of forced mindfulness. It's if you start thinking about something else, you're going to fall, and so I like it for that aspect too.
A friend of the show, Michael Hannigan, who's the host of Jedi Realist Radio on Blog Talk Radio, he turned me on maybe towards the end of last year that there are actual tournaments out there now with lightsabers, and people duel, And I thought that was really cool. They're building these federations, and they're getting bigger and bigger. They hold them in Europe, and they actually hold them in the United States now too. I don't have any one certain place to go to, but a quick Google search brings up a ton of stuff, and I think that would be kind of a cool thing for those aspiring to walk this path. If you have a group in your local area, you're definitely going to have fun, if nothing else, which is, to me, an important part of training too. Sometimes you have to have fun. I mean, you have to keep it fun, because if you don't, then you're just going to get lost in it and bored with it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, that's the whole part of this thing was to, when I wrote this book, even says in the subtitle, it's you're looking for happiness, and you do gotta let go every now and then. It can't be all, everything be so rigid and tight. You got to have your chance to cut loose. So
another interesting thing that just recently, maybe towards the middle of this month, I learned that not Star Wars, but Disney actually filed a patent to build real working lightsabers. I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure where they're going with that just yet. But I'm looking forward to. I'm spending as much time with my fingers as I can right now, so that way, someday when this becomes a reality, if I lose a few, then I've done my best to spend time with them. But I thought that was interesting. For those of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about, just do, like I said, a quick Google search on patent for real lightsaber, and Disney actually filed a patent to build them. Like I said, I don't know where they're going with it, but it should be interesting.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how that plays out as well. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they can what they're going to do with it. So, but I'll be first in line. I'll be right there. So.
Yeah, I might have to take a mortgage out on my house, but I'm sure they won't be cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the quote unquote Jedi mind, and you refer to it in your book a few times. What is and then you also refer to what you call the Jar Jar mind, and the beginner's mind. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah, the Jedi mind is just it's a mind that is, that's what we're working towards in this, and it's to, we want to lose, attachment. You kind of start learning about how the world operates. You learn about attachment and permanence and a lot of things, and you use that, and then it filters, or it's the lens through which you look at the rest of the world. And things before, someone cuts you off in traffic, suddenly you're like, maybe he's just late to work, or maybe he's got to go to the hospital, and but before you would have gotten mad about it, now you blow it off because it's not that big of a deal. That's kind of what the Jedi mind is. It's you just kind of get into this focused but yet open and forgiving kind of mental state. Is kind of the way I view the Jedi mind. The Jar Jar mind, I wish I could take credit for it, but that was Matthew Bortolin in the book he wrote, The Dharma of Star Wars. And that was his term for monkey mind, which is basically, as your mind jumps from thought to thought to thought like a monkey swinging through a tree. That's the Buddhist term is monkey mind. He called it Jar Jar mind, and I thought it was hilarious because it was a prime example. And I think it is part of the reason why he was in the movies. It was to serve as the, this is the opposite of Jedi mind, is Jar Jar mind. And the last one, the beginner's mind. Beginner's mind is just, all things are possible in the beginner's mind. And that goes into Yoda teaching Luke, you have to unlearn what you've learned. It's just realizing, and then when Luke says, you want the impossible, and, it's not the impossible. It's just something you're going to have to work towards. And, it's not just really traditional learning too, that you're unlearning. It's the restrictions that you've put on yourself as you've gone through life and you've kind of made these decisions about, well, this is what I am. And, I think that's kind of limiting. And the beginner's mind is you realize anything's possible.
I'd like to think that I'm somewhere in between the first and the last one.
Yes.
At least I strive to be. I always get weird looks when I go to a seminar or I go to a class, and even if it's and usually it's work related or something that I have been doing for a long time already. And how usually the instructor or the person at the front will say, who's done this before and who's done, that before or whatever. And I never raise my hand because I try to forget what I knew before, because if I already think that I know everything, then there's no way I'm going to learn something new. So I really like how you laid those out in the book, because it was just a reminder. This is where I need to be at all times, somewhere in between, depending on the moment.
Yeah, there's the story I do in the book too. It's it's a common tale that everyone's heard of, but it's where the guy wants to learn some martial arts and he shows up talking about how great he is, and the instructor starts pouring him some tea and just pours it in till the cup overflows, and the guy's like, well, hey, you're filling this too full. And he's like, you won't learn anything. Your mind is the full cup. You can't learn anything else because you have no room for it. So same kind of story, but yeah, you got to definitely go in. You can't go in thinking that, you know it all, because someone's always going to show you up on some aspects. So
there are many taboos associated with this path that we're talking about today, the Jedi path. Things like emotions and attachment are just a few. Passion, humility, or I should say passion, pride, things like this. How does the book address these?
We talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's you understand that there are going to be emotions and there are going to be attachments, and but it's working your way through those hurdles. It's like I like to say, if you're going to have an attachment to something, have a playful attachment. It's like, well, you have desire. You want to be a Jedi. If you didn't have desire or any kind of attachment, you wouldn't really work towards any goals. So you have to have this. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, I want to be a Jedi, and when I get to that point, that's going to be great. But if I don't make it, no, that's it's fine too. You got to. That's the way I kind of look at the attachment portion. And, the emotions are the same thing. Those are just, you can be upset at a situation, and, that will last for a couple minutes and then it'll go away at the most, but, if you start having anger is, you're not letting go of what you were upset about 10 minutes or a day or 20 years ago. And, you're holding on to that. and it's not serving you, doesn't serve you any purpose at all. So attachment's kind of like the big thing. You want to lose the attachment, because then you will lose, you can get upset, but you won't become angry. You won't develop hatred, or, a lot of the other, 7 deadly sins are all based on attachment to either something in the past or fear of the future, which, another attachment to what's going to happen in the future instead of what's happening at this moment. So they're all kind of, it's another way of, going back, be mindful of the moment, and, let it go. And what's happening now is, this is all you have. So just deal with what you have right now. So
it drives my wife nuts sometimes, because, she'll get stressed out about things that are going on. And I'm just like, in her eyes, it looks like I am non-caring, to paraphrase it. And it's not that I care. It's just that, as you said, I've simply already internalized it, and it's gone. I don't dwell on it, and that can be rough for some people, because it's easy. This world provides us plenty of opportunities to be stressed out, and plenty of opportunities to be angry or sad, or so. I just it's easy to say, internalize, let go. It's much more difficult to do. Those of us who have been doing it for a very long time, it just becomes kind of automatic after a certain point. So it can certainly frustrate those the I'll call them the uninitiated. It can really stress them out when they see someone, even things like death. I don't. I get called out a lot, and for things like death, whereas I'll grieve in a much different way. And of course, everybody grieves in their own way. But I've had people even brazen enough to say something to me. You didn't care about that person? No, I cared very much about that person, but I understand, what happens now. So I'm not sad for them. I'm happy for them, type of thing. I did a show last month sometime about pride and passion, and it talks about, what you were talking about, how these taboo subjects, and I was calling them the dirty P words, pride and passion, and how they're very taboo because, without passion, you're not going to reach your goals, because you're not going to know what to strive for. And when it comes to, pride versus humility, if you don't take pride, you're not going to do the best that you can do, and others won't have a good example to be inspired by. So, like you said, it's. I mean, you can't go overboard with them, but they exist, and they have to exist if you use them correctly.
Yeah, you have to have them, because like you said, if you're without them, then it's just not going to work, and you're not going to have any, you're not going to hold yourself accountable and things like that. But it's the towing the fine line between taking it overboard and holding on to something that's doesn't serve you any purpose.
Your book talks about controlling the Force. How does a modern Jedi control the Force?
Well, this goes into everybody's own interpretation of the Force. I like to think of it as, controlling the Force is like dancing, and you got to figure out, who's leading and who's following. And sometimes you can lead, and you can control the Force. You can bring it in as a calming energy. You can use it as an exciting energy, a healing energy. I wish we could do all the cool stuff that they could do in the movies, but not. At least I haven't figured out how to do it yet. But if somebody has, I'd like to learn. But going into you can use it for those more subjective experiences. And sometimes the Force is going to lead the way, and that's mostly intuition. And you just got to be able to learn to listen. Those little thoughts that pop into your head. You know, I prime example, I don't even know. There's a guy that retired from where I work a couple years ago. Now he does some what's the word to say? He can't fly with passengers, but he can work on like maintenance of ferry flights or something. I showed up to work because I just said, "Oh, hey, you're taking this airplane somewhere." And so I'm showing up to work, and I suddenly it just popped into my head. The guy's name popped into my head for a couple minutes, or just not even minutes, a couple seconds. I just said, "Oh, Skid," which was his call sign in the Navy. I was like, suddenly I just thought of Skid for a couple seconds. You know, whatever. I started paying attention on, what gate do I have to go to and stuff. Show up at the airplane, who's there? Skid. You know, it's just one of those. You know, and that was. Looking back, it was one of those, my intuition was trying to tell me, and it doesn't, it's not like your spotter sense. It's like, oh, bad guys are trying to jump me. It's just, it's always trying to feed you information, but usually we're so distracted that we don't listen to it and we don't pay attention. And so that's the other part of learning to, as far as controlling the force is really just being open to it for when it's going to throw you those little nuggets of whatever it is, information or a feeling or, some kind of intuition. You just got to be receptive to it. So that's the other part of it.
What about nutrition and physical exercise with this path, or with this path? Things like martial arts.
I think all those are very important in the book. I talk about it a lot in the book, as far as nutrition. And I give a lot of different martial arts examples. They're very important because, you have to be able to operate and manipulate your body. That's your carriage for your mind and your spirit is your body. So it has to be able to do what you want it to do. And, so it's going to require physical fitness training and, martial arts training, if you want to go down that path. Like I do give some examples, if you don't want to do martial arts training because of, you don't want to fight people or whatever, if that's or I should say you don't want to react to an assault because fighting is a person against a person. So, if you don't want to train that way, you can do yoga and you can do Tai Chi and other examples. It's, like I said, mentioned before, it's all movement. We all spend way too much time sitting at chairs. So all this movement that we can get, is good. And the nutrition, myself transitioned to the low carb lifestyle probably 6 years ago. And if I fall off the wagon, if I have, a lot of carbs with lunch or something like that, that 3 o'clock nap sure does seem pretty enticing. But when I stick with it now, I got the energy to go all day and do the things I want to do. So, that's the last thing is if you were called out, it'd be real bad timing if you were that one time you needed to use your body and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon just when that nap effect wants to hit, and you're not at the top of your game. So I think it's important for those reasons. We'll
coin a new phrase together here. We'll call that the turkey mind. When you eat too many carbs and at 3 o'clock, it's like it's time to nap.
Yes. It's a tough one to get through.
What is you describe in your book the Jedi spirit? What is that, and how does one cultivate that into their daily lives?
The Jedi spirit is the outgrowth of the training of the Jedi mind and the Jedi body that you've already done. The spirit is just, it's the evolution of your training. It's like, okay, so now I'm doing this, and this is where you start picking up on, empathy and compassion for, your fellow human, and you start, it's, it's difficult to put into a few words. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's the next step, and it's the once you have a firm foundation of the spirit, that's what allows you to then carry on and do the work for the Republic. It's the driving force, really, that makes you want to go out and help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And as for going. Oh, sorry, just
no, you're fine.
Training just the training and the incorporating of it is just really, it's just a daily practice of thinking beyond yourself, being mindful of the moment, and so you're very into yourself and your environment, but also thinking about the impact of what your actions are going to have on those around you.
Mm-hmm. Anything new you're working on right now that you want to share?
I got a couple more book ideas in my mind. That last one, the Modern Jedi Knight, it was a huge undertaking, and I have a ton of respect for anybody who's written a book before, because it's such a grueling and daunting process, especially if you can't work on it full time and have to drag it out over a decade like I did. I do have a couple ideas. They're going to be more lighthearted and more short reads. Probably won't even try to get traditional published. It'll probably be a 99-cent book on Amazon, that I'll have out. Might be 100 pages or something, but one's going to be more. What would the Tao Te Ching sound like if Yoda was saying it to you instead of Lao Tzu? And kind of something along that lines is something I'm kind of thinking about. And then the other one is more just a complete what I learned in life. I needed to learn, I got from Star Wars, and I'm just going to pull out quotes, and it's going to go way beyond Jedi. It's going to incorporate, quotes from all the major characters and probably even some of the bad ones as well, just as take this, and then it's like, just 4 or 5 paragraphs, just kind of talk over it, and it'll cover a lot of the same things that already discussed in this book, but it'll do it in a more lighthearted and not quite so serious manner. That, and I've got some T-shirt ideas I'm working on too, which is kind of taken away from some of my writing time right now. But I've got a design here that I'm almost done with, and I'm pretty excited. I'll probably have those, if anybody's interested. I'm probably going to sell them for cost or very little over cost, and just put them on the website.
We're coming up to, I think, 6 minutes left in the show, but I wanted to ask you just real quickly. I remember years ago, from your days with us at Ashland Knights, Mile High Jedi. Is that something that you're going to look at maybe restoring, or are you thinking about doing that again, or?
Yep. I mean, it's something, like I said, if I start to find more like-minded people, I'm actually, my schedule is the part that's so difficult right now, but what I would like to do is I'd like to just start a meetup group and put that out there and just see if I can get people in the local area who want to come in and same thing, kind of revive the New York Jedi thing that I had planned before, do it with, choreographed, and then, just some straight out dueling or sparring. And, if I get a chance to go over and train in Ludo Sport or one of the other organizations, there's like a Terra Prime Lightsaber Academy. I know there's some other ones. There's some group in the Philippines. They've all kind of coming up with these structured environments for lightsaber dueling. If I could get involved with one of those, I'd love to have, get it over and get that fired back up.
I very much look forward to you doing that. And the cool thing is, I forgot to mention this earlier, but you and I aren't that far apart, just probably a 35-minute drive. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Who knows? Maybe maybe someday you'll have a big team that you could take to the tournaments and do those tournaments that they're starting to do a lot. I think that'd be really cool. Be a lot of fun.
Yes, I agree. I think that'd be pretty spectacular if we could pull it off.
As is customary here at the Knights of Awakening, this is the opportunity that I'll give you to leave some final thoughts for the audience before we all part ways. But before we do that, make sure you tell everyone where they can find your book, where they can get it, and any relevant pages that you want to share.
All right. The book, The Modern Jedi Knight, is currently an ebook available at Amazon.com. Just search for Modern Jedi Knight. It's last time I looked, that's the first one that shows up at the top of the list. And I'm still working on a traditional publisher, so hopefully maybe we can get that in a paperback or hardback version here pretty soon. Otherwise, the websites, it's modernjediknight.com. If that's a little too long, I've got a couple others that will direct that way. You can do beajedi.com or beajedi.org. And milehighjedi.com also all leads to the main site for now. And that's pretty much how you can get in touch with me. We have our Facebook and Twitter pages that are all just search for Modern Jedi Knight, and you'll find us in there as well. We share some stuff on there. And as for my final thoughts, it's a little cliche, but it's just be good to everyone and go out and inspire someone today, and always make yourself better than you were the day before.
All right. I want to thank you so much for giving me some of your time, and congratulations on your book.
Yes, thank you. And it was my pleasure. It's a good 2 hours.
Yeah, and it went by fast too, didn't it? It always does.
It went by really fast.
Well, thanks again, and take care.
All right, thank you. You too.
Knights, that was Matthew Siegrist, author of The Modern Jedi Knight, A Guide to Health and Happiness inspired by the Masters from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Over the years, we've helped many authors, groups, charities, organizations, and so many others spread their message with a worldwide audience of people who are interested in what you have to say and, what you're working on. As always, we want to help you spread the word. If you're a little nervous about the prospect of getting on the air with me, number one, I can't bite you. At least not yet. Maybe in the future I'll be able to reach out and bite you or pinch you or something. But for now, I can't do that. So, but you can always take a look at some of the prior interviews that we've conducted, and we call them interviews, but really more like conversations. So, if you're nervous about that prospect, don't be. We've been doing this a long time, and I promise you'll be taken care of. And of course, I'll put some links. If you're watching this over at YouTube and not live, there'll be links in the description to take you over there if you're still kind of on the fence about it. As I said in the review video for this book, if you want a chance to win one of two copies of this book, make sure you're a subscriber to the KOA channel. Leave us a like on the video, share the video, and then leave a comment. That way I can track who's participating, and then we'll pick two winners at random. I want to thank you all for joining me today. Again, make sure you subscribe to the channel and to over here at Blog Talk Radio to get the most up-to-date information. I love you all very much. And until next time, awaken the night within.